My name is Henrik. I work in Vattenfall. I work on group level. I sit in a part which is called Group Financial Systems. So I'm sitting on the business side, not on the IT side. And what we do is that we are looking at our common systems quite a lot. Our ERP systems, our common traditional warehouses. And now also, how do we look at the common part of our digital platform that we've been building for the last couple of years. So I thought I'd talk a little bit today about how to manage information and do information governance on a digital platform. One of the key things that I have experienced working with this since the last couple of years and intensively since 2016 is that a lot of times when you go to conferences, when you speak to consultants, you start on a fairly high-flying level. Got to do data governance. Got to do AI. Got to be data first. Yes, I got it. I got that part. I read the memo. I read the research. So how do I do it? So what I'm trying to do today here is literally, in a quite naked way, maybe I could say, this is what we have been working on. And this is coming from a couple of core philosophy points. Number one, we use the word moving the needle. So if I want to do data governance, okay, we need to build a framework, we need to build policies, but ultimately, a key challenge is, of course, to get to the operational value. How do I get it down in the ground? How do I get the work done? Who's doing the actual work? What is the actual work we are talking about? What does an information steward do from Monday to Friday? Moving the needle, not creating more PowerPoints. That was one thing we were trying to achieve. So I'm calling this a case study on information stewardship. So we're actually talking about information governance on a digital platform, but we're trying to talk about it from, okay, I'm going to hire an information steward now. What the hell should he do? How should he work? That's the context. Another part of this context on Vattenfall, we are in an amazing industry right now. The energy industry is so exciting. So we are going through several paradigm shifts at once. Can you imagine? That sounds cool. So we're coming from a traditional energy value chain with big production power plants, pushing energy down a very traditional energy value chain, hitting the retail customer. So we have production, nuclear, wind, hydro, and then we have trading. So they are selling. Their business model ends with their production selling to the market, Nord Pool in Sweden. Then we trade and optimize how we buy the energy from ourselves and sell it to the networks. The networks that we have two bills at home, a network bill, and then you get your retail bill. So literally, very siloed business model, clear P&Ls in the past. In the energy space, this is not going to be the case. We're all going to be prosumers, we think. We're all going to have electric car batteries that will, we will charge them, but then we will use the same battery to put balancing power back in the grid, maybe, demand response. So we are coming into network ecosystems. And the key point here is that we believe that the new business models, the new innovation is to some degree intersectional. So it's going to happen in between the traditional business model. It's going to happen in terms of new types of customers. So who is our customer, if I talk B2B? Who is our partner? Who is our competitor? So really, we are using the word now on top level, sharing is the new black. Data sharing is the new black. And this is coming in a utility which are highly regulated in terms of how we use data. So these things can't be done in siloed application-centric setups. Data platform, digital platform becomes a core fundament of trying to understand how we move forward. All right, that's a little bit of context. Now, another part of the context. Okay, let's look at this journey now. Information stewardship on a digital platform, information governance. I don't know how many have heard this, but ultimately one of the biggest challenges to go from PowerPoint to action is fundamentally data literacy in our companies, right? This is one of the biggest hurdles. Okay? It's enormous, right? And it starts on CEO level and moves all the way down to every single role. We need to have information as a second language, and we need to be able to speak it and work with it according to the type of role we have. So if I'm a data scientist, I will be a professor. But my CEO needs to know what a data catalog is. My CEO needs to know that. Typically, this has been way too operational for a CEO. But this is AI first, data first we have in mind when we say this. So what I found was a couple of things that these are the kind of things that you really need to be on top of when you become an information steward, in our experience, in the way we have described the role. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but the top one, I urge you all, try to understand and get a point of view for yourself. What is the difference of an application-centric approach to how we build systems and processes to an information asset-centric way on a platform? This is one of the key strategic information strategy topics, data strategy topics here. How to not build a full stack for each front-end application in a silo, but rather using all the data that you have in a way that you can combine it, reuse it, build a new use case, you took data and did all this work from our ERP system for reporting. Should I now do exactly the same thing for another purpose, or could I reuse some of the work that I've done? Our IT people have done it in the past, but the business people have not really known what's been happening further down in the data warehouse. So there's a couple of things here that is absolutely crucial that you get your point of view around. Information ownership, data ownership. You need to reflect on this. You have source systems. Maybe you have a core process somewhere where the data is produced or where the transaction takes place. A data owner is close to a process owner. I can get that. When we go to digital platform, I'm using several processes, someone else's data, and I'm combining it in a new information value chain. So I'm taking ERP data from the finance process. I take asset data from the maintenance process of nuclear power plant, and I take weather data from an external provider, and I take market data from my trading business in order to build a predictive maintenance model that is optimizing when we should do maintenance based on return on capital employed, as an example. Contextual analytics I'm talking about here, guys. So when we do contextual analytics, you have taken someone else's data, and now you're creating your own value chain and an analytical asset on top. A report, an algorithm, a new process. So it's different type of ownership on a digital platform compared to the original ownership. If you don't get your head around that in your company, data governance and information governance struggles, right? Very fundamental principles that we need to get our head around. I'm going to stop here on this topic, but you get the picture. There is a certain topics that you need to start thinking about when you truly want to do and think about how to set up information stewardship and data governance. We have come through the path that we need to have it. We are scratching our heads how to do it. This is what the rest is all about. We started the journey a little bit like this. In the simplest term, we want our information steward. This is our interpretation. We want the information steward to actually act on behalf of the information owner. So if I'm on the top of the information value chain, I have an algorithm, I have a report, I have something that is used, that is creating the actions. This is the value that is really creating in the business. We need to guide that person who owns that process, that information, to really do it right, the whole pipeline, the whole value chain. So information stewardship is here to sort of act on the information perspective. What does that mean? What do we talk about then? So when I try to frame this, how do I make money out of good information governance? How does this help me? The drivers, one typical way of why you set up information governance is the traditional risk, compliance, security. Okay, this is a defensive governance strategy if you're only hitting the sort of the risk part. Then when you want to drive information governance to create business value, you come to the fundamentals like quality is one, right? Depending on what the use case is all about, what is the right level of quality? So garbage in, garbage out. What is garbage is one thing when I do accounting, and maybe you can have fuzzy, noisy data when you do analytics in some areas to get trends. High value, so quality definition is not one in a company like Vattenfall. Transparency, reusability. Ultimately, I like the whole idea. Forget about data lake. Talk about data catalogs. Talk about how to find your information assets. So the data lake is the first idea. We get all the information assets into one pool. But then we need to be able to take this molecule out of the Atlantic, the right one. Then you need to think about, how do I find my assets, or what type of assets do I have swimming around in this lake? Okay, reusability, transparency, data lineage, all these fundamentals. If I'm trying to be concrete on a digital platform, what are the key scenarios or key data problems that we are sort of looking at? How do I ingest data? What do I need to do in order to ingest data so I can search for it, so I can understand it? How do I use data so I know I can trust it? What is the level of quality I need for a financial report versus a trend? How do I allow people now to access this data? Okay, I have all this data in the lake. We have GDPR flying around out there. We have national security information in my so I need to understand, how can I now connect and access this data to reuse it? Monitor it. Okay, if I set up a data pipeline, we're not going to work in the pipeline anymore. We're going to monitor it. Okay, this is the AI revolution, the data revolution is bigger than the industrial revolution. Going from, automating muscle power, now we're automating brain power. We're going to work in the data factory. We're not going to be there moving the data bit, right? We're going to monitor and design the pipelines. Okay, so what does that lead us to? It leads us to a quite complicated situation that when you want to do this on a digital platform, you have information architecture consideration, you have information asset management consideration if you want to see your information as a even monetized asset. You have the governance, the policies, what you can do and not do. But we have highlighted the information steward as sort of putting a person, putting a role, putting a function, who is doing the main job here. So I'm focusing on the stewardship part. But they're all interrelated, but not necessarily typically sitting in the same part of the organization. Where's the information architect sitting? How many is an information architect? I'm not saying system architect, I'm saying information architect. I'm not even sure I have one. I have several system architects, by the way, and they sit in IT, right? A little bit new here, right? So I'm not talking about which database we should use. I'm talking about how we structure the database. If I have a highly complex, many information domains that I want to join, how do I do that? All right, so now let's go into this information steward. So for the rest of now, I will sort of zoom in on the information steward and this case study, what we have been doing here. So we try to basically sort out, okay, what does an information steward do? How does his work look like? And we sort of highlighted these three main areas. He's a collaborator, he's an expert, he's an operator. And what I'm trying to highlight here is that when we start joining massive amounts of data, and we are joining financial model data with customer data, with asset data, no one has the full view of the information model anymore. We have several information domains. So there needs to be a fundamental collaboration talking about data. In its simplest form, I have my financial model. I want to have a cost structure on this asset, a wind turbine. Where do I join these two models? Very basic. If I want to do cost analysis on a wind turbine, I have my cost structure, my cost center, my profit center, my general ledger. Where do I join these two models to make any sense of the cost structures in relation to a turbine piece, right? This is hardcore information architecture. So you need to have people who knows the information and knows the financial model, who can talk to someone who knows the asset model, who can make this judgment. Where's the best way to join this? Knowing what we're trying to achieve. And then, of course, going more into expert, working on behalf of the information owner means I want to put the information management requirements on the table when I build any system or I maintain any system. So typically, we have done our business requirements, is functional requirements on top level, what the report should do or what the website should do. And then you have someone dealing with the technical architecture, the technical requirements from IT. What's the performance? Should we use a blue or red box? Stuff like this. What database is it on? But here we are talking about information management requirements. So what is my requirements on reusability? What is my requirements on data quality? What is my et cetera, et cetera. So very, very simply put, I'm using the Information Steward to add to the requirement list in my backlog to sync information assets. That's it. No rocket science. So we have typically the business person know their analog top process, so they talk about that. And typically IT talk about the technologies. We heard the technologies. You need to have a, but from a not from a feature perspective, but from a problem-solving perspective, the Information Steward simply adds this piece in the middle. That's all. That's how we philosophize around this. Very simply put. Then when we do this work, we come to quite different part of information stewardship, with the operating part. So you have defined, you designed, you've set up your pipeline. What happens now? Who is monitoring data quality on a daily basis? Who is tagging the metadata of your new asset that you just brought in? You added a new dimension in your report. So who classified that? All this stuff. So how to organize this is very tricky because it drives across business view versus very technical view. It should be in business from a philosophical point of view in my mind, information with the information owner, risk owner has the information steward. But the competence and data literacy typically in our normal Swedish business, that comes from a traditional background, I would highlight. It's very hard to do without a stronger IT background. And some of these tasks you maybe have someone who's more senior who can do the hardcore expert work, and you can try to streamline how you do the more operating work. Use some hints. So the way we looked at this, how to make this work in all of Vattenfall, which obviously then have vastly different use cases. I'm in finance, reporting. Sometimes it needs to balance out to zero, right? You need to balance your accounts. And somewhere else, we want to do crazy stuff, test new weather pattern models into our pricing strategy for markets. We don't even know it's going to work. So we think that in order for this to work, you need to always look at what are the stuff that we need to set up for each use case. And what is a use case? Ultimately, boiling it down to one key scenario, one key problem that you're solving. If it's the reporting, if it's about self-service BI visualizations, is it predictive maintenance within hydro? So for me, it's tricky. I even have in predictive maintenance different use cases if I go to distribution compared to wind, because our networks has security classed information. It's military class views, our networks. So we need to take in more features around security and risk when we think about that compared to when we do predictive maintenance for wind farms. So you need to go all the way down to connect to your use case. So what we then said was, okay, let's have a very basic process. Because if we want to move the needle, we're not going to move the needle with another policy sitting on group level in someone's shelf. I need to get this into every project. In every project I do from now on this digital platform, I need to consider this. That's the hard truth. So secure the role. Who takes these data topics on board in this project? Do you have an information steward named? No? Don't worry about it. Who is the data expert that we can use that we will now help build? Someone needs to do it. Secure the role in the team of the information steward acting on these topics. Then we have what we call establish and frame. The first topic is really to understand what are then the requirements and principles around information governance and stewardship that we think are important that we want to bring into this case. So we have our policies around GDPR. Okay, is it GDPR data? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, bring that in. And then we move on in that direction. So we have tried to work on a principle level what we think is very good data management on a digital platform. Topics like data lineacy, lineage, topic like data quality. So giving a guidance for people to think for themselves what is relevant for their use case. So when we've set that up, literally what we are doing, we are trying to understand what is the use case all about. We then go to our enterprise framework and try to think, okay, what can I steal now from what they did something in distribution. Let's have a look at that. Can I take it straight off? Okay, I can take the whole thing. I need to add this. I need to tweak it like that. So trying then to reuse what we have done in earlier projects. And then basically, bottom line, this type of work really fits with an agile view, because how long is a piece of string? You know, it's a little bit like saying, what's the minimum viable product we can have now? Okay, let's just get that done first. Now what? How can we be more automated? Et cetera, right? So don't view this as, it's a never-ending story, because you come into operation, and in operation you want to be more lean on these topics. So we see this as breaking it down into a backlog with these stories, user stories. And by the way, by calling them user stories, you tend to focus on the problem of the business. So it's a good selling point if you know you're agile. The way you articulate why you need a data catalog in relation to the business problem. That's good. So when we do that, we bring that into the normal sprint cycles. Now, either you bring it into with your product owner with a whole system, or if you want to have focus, you do your own backlog here. So this is different ways of organizing this. Is the information steward part of the agile team, or is he, an expert sitting on the side helping the agile team? And basically, we are doing that stepwise in a way that, take what is fitting the life cycle of the use case. So we don't need to ingest data now. Okay, those are the topics that we focus on first. Now I need to have data quality dashboard up. Okay, I didn't need that in the beginning of the project, but I need that before I go into full production. And then what we do, we really understand how do we package the work we've done into trainings, processes, work instructions to push work back out into the business, as much of this operating work, so we don't get stuck with information steward, which is quite scarce, to do the wrong jobs. And then the last bit, we harvest, what have we done now? How do we bring that up as best practice examples, or do we even add this data quality policy as our enterprise policy now? So we try to harvest this, so we have a learning loop into an enterprise framework. That's how it is. So, how many minutes do we have left? Because I started about 10 minutes late. 5 minutes? We have about 7 minutes. All right. So, what you saw now was literally how we meddled around to come up with this idea. Basically, we started the discussion on we need it and what's the problem. We did the whole problems, we got it up on the EGM level, the top level in 2016. So we started the journey in 13, 14, right? And then we had, fundamental decisions in 16 in Vattenfall. We need to have a digital platform, and if we're going to do digital platform, we need to have information stewardship, information governance. All right. So to tell this story has been sort of the iterative way of trying to understand and build a point of view of this. I could probably not have done the picture this way in two years ago, but this is how I understand my own journey now. Yeah, I couldn't have done the perfect blueprint, and it's still not the perfect blueprint. But you need to get your hands dirty on this. You need to have someone driving this and really start working on this and putting substance behind it. So the case study now is very clearly, we worked on this framework level when we started the digital platform, and then very soon we had a quite big project going on in finance. And the case study here is a very basic, simple one, right? So we all know reporting in an enterprise context. We all know that we all have Excels and many different departmental tools out there with a fundamental problem that we have all built our own data pipelines. Sometimes shadow IT, very manual, sometimes better, nicer, using our common warehouses. But even in our warehouses, we found that we don't have a true, information asset-centric strategy. We go to IT with a reporting problem, and then we build this integration application by application. Concretely, what that means is that when you go to IT, as in our case, I want to have a report with these 3-4 dimensions. And when you have that, IT is charged to be as effective as possible, so they do a very narrow focus on those couple of tables they need, and then they bring that up. Now, when you've done that for 10, 15 years, you have spaghetti. And we want to build lasagna. You saw the very beautiful picture from Informatica. This is lasagna we don't do now. Huh? No more spaghetti. Okay. All right. So this is the fundamentals. When you come to a point where you have data sitting in many information domains, how to bring them up, this whole data provisioning, data platform strategy is key, not Power BI. You can use Power BI as you used Excel in the past, no different. You just get it on your desktop and go. What's stopping you, right? That's not what we want. So we try to organize this and discuss this as a business case for business control. You know, what is really we're trying to drive here ultimately? Improve better decisions, more faster decisions, starting with reporting and visualizations, moving more and more forward-looking as we mature. We want to have a fundamentally automated provisioning chain. The strategy is automating the provisioning chain. We not want to have our controllers working and moving the data through the chain. We need to monitor it. And of course, if I have this spaghetti, to really do data security and do compliance becomes really, really expensive to do it right. Okay, this is a way to look at our platform. Look at this now. I'm trying to make a picture that is not looking at this from a technology point so much, but more trying to follow the information. So we have an enterprise part of how we want to take data from our ERP systems. And ultimately, this case is about self-service reporting. So we have finance common reports we want to govern with us, and we want to, in the same platform, allow a federated approach where BAs, business areas and business units can govern this. So what we are doing then is trying to understand the information pipeline. So really thinking about how do I govern the raw layer? Okay, now I have combined the financial hierarchy that I want to reuse. No, I can plug that in, or I have a KPI. I have my FTE KPI for the whole company. I don't want people to sit there and they can subscribe to that into their algorithm or their report that they are doing. So trying to understand this flow is absolutely vital. It really starts here to then understand what are the governance features you want to focus on. And then we went through this storyline, establish what you saw before. And the way we did that very, very quickly was trying to pinpoint then what are the core governance features, what are the user stories around information that we valued the most. So we boiled it down to data quality management, data flow monitoring, user access, cloud security, data classification, common report governance. So basically, how do I manage a portal of analytical assets such as reports? How do I decide? How do I keep that clean? Yeah. So data catalog, right? How do I catalog the assets? And then basically what we did, we highlighted what is the information steward? How do I work with this? Very simply put, in relation to these features, worked with the dev team to get the requirements on the table. Then when the requirements were there, testing it. But also in terms of, we built an EBIT report, testing the EBIT report on a very much deeper level, on the database level. So we had an information steward, the way we see this is quite data competent or information model competent to take an EBIT definition and then being able to understand which are the fields in SAP that is behind here. So that's a flavor, yeah? And then the last bit of this really has been to, when we onboard more and more people into this, more and more target groups, more and more reports, is to basically hold their hand and make sure that each new project is doing the same. And or revising and challenging what we are doing, but growing with us and not forgetting about this piece. So I'll stop here.
You will indeed. Thank you very much.